This is Private Matters, and I'm Max van Praag, and we're talking here on the show about thriving in intimacy. Today's show is about sacred sexuality, and my guests are Francesca Gentille and Tim Emert, a dynamic couple, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful to have you on the show. You are doing wonderful work, and you are creating community. Something I love about you is the boldness with which you create community and blend spirituality and sexuality. You are teachers of sacred sexuality. Yes. What is sacred sexuality?
Isn't all sex sacred?
Well, you know, I think my beloved brings up a good point, is that when I have talked to groups of people, the room will usually fall into two camps. And one camp is that all sex is sacred, that it's inherently sacred. Whatever you do, it's sacred, that all life is sacred. But then there's the other camp. And the other camp of people say that sex is an energy that's neutral. It's like jello, it's like electricity. It's really kind of a neutral energy. And until you bring intention to it, it isn't anything at all. So if you bring a sacred intention to the energy of sex, then it becomes sacred. And so
I would say it's the two camps. It's the one camp that believes that bringing something sacred, giving it a sacred intention makes it sacred, and then the other camp that tends to believe that bringing a sacred intention helps us recognize the sacredness and the magic that was there to begin with. And I would say that both are true. As long as we recognize the sacred, as long as we bring our attention to the sacred.
As opposed to sex being something dirty that we do in a way that's not.
Well, that's where we differ, because I think that when sex is something dirty and nasty and whatever, it's still sacred.
Yes.
I think that, you know what, if it's all sacred, then nothing is profane. Even the profane is sacred.
And I would say that sex has more of a, that sacred sex, once again, if we take, let's define sex, shall we? And then let's define sacred. So let's define sex as the energy of arousal. That sex may even start with that moment when people look at each other and there's that connection. Because that connection, that spark, that wink, that flirt, is the start of something that later ends up being in genital contact, or later ends up being in penis and vagina. But it starts really with an energy that starts to circulate between two or more people. So we can say that sex is the energy of arousal that manifests in a variety of ways. Now, what about sacred? Once again, when I ask people, or you even look up the definition, you'll see that sacred is often described as set apart or precious in some way. And if we think of the sacred as special, as precious, as set apart from the mundane, then sexuality becomes sacred when we bring a consciousness to it, like we do to a church. A church is just a building.
Like making your room beautiful.
Like making your room beautiful, but even a church is just a building until it's actually sanctified. Then it becomes a sacred space.
Yes.
And if we're starting with the space, part of sanctifying a space or making a space beautiful could be these beautiful orchids, could be the lighting, but all of that comes from the intention. If my intention is that I want my beloved to feel special, I want him to feel precious, I want him to feel safe, then how can I design or coordinate the environment so that he has that experience? And when we talk about energy, we also need to talk about, I think, quantum physics. And did you want to talk to that a little bit, sweetheart?
It's been basically proven that thought affects the physical world.
Yes.
And so, therefore, the scientists supposed that the smallest unit of matter is thought. And if the smallest unit of matter is thought, therefore our thoughts matter. And we often think of, in the physical world, we think everything follows the path of least resistance. Water will roll downhill, electricity follows the path of least resistance. But it's sort of like thought and intention prepares the way. A drop of water falling down my hand will follow the path of least resistance, but you can drop the same drop in the same spot, and it will have a different path. Mm-hmm. But if you sort of moisten a path, it will tend to follow that path already. A river flowing down a hill, if there's a path that's already prepared, it will follow that path more likely. And so it's like thought and intention it prepares the way for energy to follow an easier path.
Would you say energy follows thought?
Yes.
Yes, energy follows thought.
Energy follows thought or intention. And so I would say that what makes sex sacred is our intention. Mm-hmm. Really, it's simple in essence, is that
it's true.
If we say, let's have sacred sex, we're already moving into that because we're thinking about it.
Yes.
It's not as much what we're doing, and it's more the intention that we're bringing.
Yes. Yes. And so something I appreciate about you is that you also teach sacred BDSM. Yes. A lot of people have a new age approach to sexuality, and it is all about light. And I personally believe that it is as much about darkness. And so what I appreciate about you is that you really are not afraid of darkness, and you really go there, and you, as a matter of fact, you are in a master-slave relationship.
Yes. The foundation of our relationship is really in spirituality. But early on in our relationship, my beloved decided to dedicate to me as my slave. Would you like to say something about your dedication?
I would like to say something about that. Is that in Tantra, and I'm imagining you've interviewed various people about the Tantric path, there is a concept called bhakti, or devotion, and a concept called seva, or sacred service. Mm-hmm. And in Hindu Tantra, you could be in devotion and service to a temple or a community. You could be in bhakti and seva to a particular deity, male or female, or your beloved can represent deity. Your beloved can represent the divine. So to me, I am in devotion and sacred service to my beloved who represents the divine to me. And we share a spiritual path, and we were visiting a temple and staying overnight in it in Northern California. And I woke up early in the morning with almost like a voice in my head that told me to kneel outside the bed and to offer myself heart, body, mind, spirit, and eros to him. And so I woke him up, and he was kind of rubbing his eyes. It was early, and I was naked, and I knelt beside the bed, and I said, "I have a gift for you."
My first thought was, couldn't it wait? So I'm like, "What? You have a gift? What is it?" And she kneels next to the bed, and she looks at me so sweetly.
And you knew this woman at this point?
Oh, yes, we were lovers at that point.
Oh, you were lovers at this point.
It was not a requirement to be submissive to me to be in relationship with me. We're in relationship as priest and priestess. But at that moment, she knew that I had a kinky practice.
But that's all I knew. I just knew that he had a kinky background. I actually had no idea what that meant. And so I knelt outside of the bed, and I said, "I offer myself to you in unconditional love, service, and devotion. Heart, body, mind, spirit, and eros."
And I just was taken aback for a moment. I rubbed the sleep crusties out of my eye. And
I would be too.
Well, and I was in awe, really. I was awestruck for a moment. And I said, "Are you asking me for my collar?" And she...
And I said, "I don't know. Let me check." And so I meditated for a moment or two to connect to where I feel spirit. And I think we all have our individual way of doing that. And I felt this assurance, like, yes, the collar is what I wanted. But once again, I didn't know what that meant. So I said, yes, I want your collar.
And she just looked at me so sweetly. What does that mean? And you know, I very briefly explained to her that I said that would mean that I would own you and your body is mine. And then I grabbed her and ravaged her in the temple. And that was just our sweet initiation to our master-slave relationship.
Beautiful.
And I would say that if we get back to that darkness and light again, is that if we have too much light, that's like a nuclear bomb. That destroys everything. Nothing would grow. The plants take in light, but they actually grow in the dark. The baby grows in the darkness of the mother's womb. And ancient peoples knew that the dark was fertile. It was nourishing. It was the cave of treasures and the great below of transformation. And ancient peoples knew that we needed this cycle of both light and dark to grow, to evolve. And so when I came into the spiritual community, there was this sense of enlightenment, enlightenment, enlightenment. And every time someone said that, I would almost cringe in a way. It doesn't feel right to me. It feels very out of balance. So over time, I started to speak about enlightenment and endarkenment. You know, that we need the both and. We need light eros and we need dark eros. We need all of it. And the Buddhist path, which many people in the Bay Area love, really is a path towards this unconditional loving acceptance of all that is, of everything, nothing. And you can't just have light to get to that totality of acceptance and compassion.
The flip side of that also is really a sense of denial. I look at a lot of the people who are all about light, especially the tantric sexuality community. Some of the people really believe in just, everything's light and beautiful. And it's like, the brighter your light, the larger and deeper your shadow. And then
where's your anger? Where's your?
And sometimes it's like, where's the depth? And then we look in the kinky community, and it's the same sort of denial in the opposite direction. We're like, ooh, aren't I dark and mysterious, and can't I do wonderful things with pointy objects? And it's like, you're denying your light. There's no shadow without light. And really the Buddhist traditions, the Buddhist teachings is always the middle way.
Nice.
And we teach endarkenment and enlightenment, the idea that we have to know our shadow and delve deep into our shadow and go into the underground, but we also have to acknowledge the light and be nourished in the light.
And come back into the light.
Yeah.
That this cave of treasures is, in shamanic practice, they talk about this cave of treasures, this great below, is what holds what is lost, hidden, rejected, suppressed, and denied in us. What is lost, hidden, rejected, suppressed, and denied. And in the process of being enculturated, growing up in a family, growing up in a community, we're given rules that, in a sense, are put there to protect us or to, help us function in the dance of society. But often what happens is we start to lose pieces of ourselves. If I think that mom and dad won't accept me in a certain way, then I'm going to hide that I'm angry, or I'm going to hide that I'm passionate.
Right.
And sometimes even more, we get cultural messages that are very negative about sexuality or the body or aging or emotions. And so human beings are carrying what I would say are wounds or restrictions or disconnections from their wholeness. And at some point in our life, I think we have an opportunity, I think aging is an opportunity, to start to reclaim these pieces of ourselves. We wake up one day and say, I feel so disconnected from you, or I've lost my sex drive, or I don't even feel like a woman anymore, or here I am and I have the job and I have the money or I have the house, but I feel so empty. I think that's an opportunity to say, what is missing inside, that if I could reclaim it, would bring a vitality to all of my life and my sex life and everything I'm doing. And it's often a journey, a process to recover, a very courageous journey to recover sometimes my anger But if I have more anger, I have more passion. Sometimes to recover my passion. And then maybe when I'm more passionate, I notice that I have other emotions too.
Sometimes what we would say is in someone's shadow, what they're rejecting, what is repressed, hidden, rejected, or denied, is their light. You know, sometimes what is in their shadow is actually their lightness. It's their greatness. Sometimes it's their power in the world. And so part of it is that we believe part and parcel of all of this is the journey to come to greater wholeness and completeness within ourselves. And fully owning the power of BDSM is just another way, another tool set.
Sure, it's another part.
And
How did you come to teach sacred sexuality?
well, there's an interesting thing I think about being a teacher, is that especially in the realms of maybe sacred sexuality or sacred BDSM, we don't necessarily start out as children saying, I'm going to teach this when I grow up, because there's no one there ahead of us to say that you could even become that kind of teacher. And I think for me how it happened is seeing what I had worked so hard to attain, or was still working hard to attain, and then realizing that there were friends around me that hadn't realized that yet. So I would naturally, I'd want to help others in a sense.
But I imagine there was a particular incident that was like a changing moment.
I could point to a distinct incident in my life, but
Oh,
it's
please.
very simple for me. Unlike her, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I've known since childhood that my goal was to be a teacher and a scientist, somebody who studies the world and then shows people what I figured out. And in a way, being a priest is another flavor of that. And so really when we got together was when that shifted for me. I'd just come off a divorce and a difficult time in life, and lost my job, and all that typical story. And then I signed up for one of her classes. Actually, my ex-wife put me on her mailing list and said, you should meet this woman. And so I signed up for one of her classes.
Oh, that's how you met?
We met briefly because we were in the same pagan community, but we didn't really know anything beyond each other's names until we met because my ex-wife had met her and put me on her mailing list. And then, the first time I really recall getting to know each other was the first day of class, or I guess the interview process for the class. And it was a few months into the class we started developing a relationship because we shared interests, because we were connected in a spiritual way. And she looked at me, and we started the relationship, and she started saying, this isn't going to work because I need to travel the world and teach. I'm like, that's my life purpose. That's my goal, is to travel the world and teach. And she said, well, it's not going to work because I have a spiritual focus. I'm like, oh, I really have a spiritual focus, and that's one of the very important things in my life. And so we started coming together on this. And so through the process where I was going through all this change, we really connected as teachers, as spiritual leaders, and it just was natural to come together as teachers.
So you would say I was his initiating incident of,
exactly.
of being a teacher of sacred eros, that I brought him in. And, but the desire, the longing, and the background was already inside him. And I would say for me, it came through spiritual path work that I actually had gone to Holy Names to take a spirituality intensive. And it included, my background is Catholic, and it included what they call body prayer. We'd be in the rose garden in the morning, and we'd be, praying and blessing life and the earth. And then there was a part of our days that would be done in body prayer in movement, and we would be, they'd put on music and our eyes would be closed and we'd be dancing. And one of the teachers took me aside and he said, there's something that moves through you when you dance that is very sacred, and you need to do something with this. And I said, like what? And he said, maybe be a teacher like me, maybe be a teacher performer like me, but I really feel that there's something here for you, Francesca. And I thought about it, but I didn't know. It felt very intimate. Dancing for me did feel like a prayer to God. And I was at a festival a little later, and I was dancing while the drums were drumming with my eyes closed. When I opened my eyes, there were about 3 men in front of me with awe. And they said, oh, we wish we could move so sensually in our bodies like you do. And I said, I'm really committed that human beings, especially men, are fully embodied in their spirit, in their sensuality. And they said, where do you teach? And I said, I don't teach yet, but I could teach. And I put up a little sign that said at the fire circle, it was at Harbin Hot Springs, that the fire circle I would teach at 6 o'clock. And 8 people showed up. And I taught them. And when I got back home from the festival, a friend of mine called me, and he said that he was teaching a 6-month series on sacred erotic dance. And he was looking for someone to perform with for the opening night. And out of all the women he'd ever danced with, I was the one who had the most sense of the sacred in her dance. Would I perform with him?
That sounds like Cinderella.
I know, and I said yes, I would perform with him. And I went, I never spoke, and I left, and I called him the next day and I said, I'm meant to teach this with you. He said, no, you're not. I've already got people lined up. I have the Hawaiian dance teacher, I have the Middle Eastern dance teacher, I have the East Indian dance teacher. I'm teaching with other women. I said, no, you're going to be teaching this with me.
What age were you?
I was, let me see, I was 40.
You're 40, okay.
I was 40, and I felt it was this breakthrough. My 40s, for anyone out there that's, listening, and some of our women who are watching and listening, that I think of aging as aging juicy, aging delicious, that I feel like it keeps getting better. And it was in my 40s that I started teaching sacred sensual dance and coaching in sacred sensual movement. And it just really evolved, Max. I'd have people come into me, and then maybe they didn't want to dance, but they were really called to me as a teacher or as a guide. So I'd have to work with a different modality. And eventually, something that I train people in called shamanic soul coaching came out of that work. And what I realized is that one of the biggest areas of wounding in our culture is around our sexuality. And that my desire is actually less about that people have sacred sex and more about that they have a sacred life, that they're embodied in spirit, that they're enjoying a beautiful life, la dolce vita, that they're feeling their emotions in a positive way. I really want this holistic experience for them. But when I recognized how wounded people were around their sexuality and how often it was coming up as an issue, it started to, more and more of my practice, my private practice and my teachings would often go in that direction.
Life
along with
really
people,
begins with sex,
yeah, and
literally.
And people are excited by sex. If you say, come to this workshop and we're going to stir up all your really heavy issues and you're going to have to face money, power, aging, emotions, they might say, I don't want to go there. But if you say, come to this workshop that's going to open up your sexuality, and oh, by the way, we're going to dealing with some of the things that happen to block that, now they're interested.
Exactly.
So that's your mission, is to help people embody themselves fully and have a wonderful life, a very full life.
To really be able to enjoy and experience all of life as sacred and beautiful. And when the sexual energy is flowing beautifully, everything else in life does seem to line up beautifully.
You made a very good point that it's not all about sex. That this is,
No.
it's not all about sex. Somebody very wise actually said you can have all the sex and intimacy in the world if you're not too interested in it. There's like if you.
It's a fascinating paradox there.
Yes.
And I would say that the chakra system that many of us talk about is the various energy centers that line up along the spine from our perineum and our feet up to our crown, is that this is eros or energy. The erotic energy is meant to flow throughout the whole body. It's really the life force. It's not just sex. It's the life force.
The life force.
And when someone comes to us and we have an intimacy issue, like, honey, we're having an intimacy issue here. And it could be I'm saying I don't want to have sex with you, but it may be less about our genitals and more about that maybe trust has been broken, or that I haven't worked out how to speak my truth to you about what I really want, or I've lost the vision of what's possible. And so when we look at how can we have great sex, we're actually looking at a holistic system.
And I would also say that most of the problems in our lives, most of the things that we have run up against as mental and emotional blocks will manifest in sexuality. You know, if it's very stereotypical to say when a guy's lost his job,
Sure.
then he doesn't feel as potent in the bedroom.
Sure.
It's all a feedback loop.
And it's a reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it impacts the life force. If someone's grieving, if someone's lost a job, they've lost hope, they've lost faith, that's going to impact the whole system.
Yes.
And then, you know, we also like to look at, you know, as counselors, we like to look at the biology of, you know, our hormone levels. I mean, there's many levels to look at.
And all of evolution is geared towards sexuality. I mean, when they talk about survival of the fittest, it's not, I mean, really, Darwin's theory wasn't who's the smartest or strongest survives, it's who has sex and procreates survives. It's all of our evolution is geared towards sexuality. So sexual health is also a strong marker of our overall health. Even if one is celibate, if their body is still functional sexually, that's a strong marker of their overall health.
What is hot for you?
What is hot?
For you.
What is hot for me? I think I align with the sexual sapiens that a brilliant mind is very hot, along with a brilliant spirit. I think if you have a great mind and a great heart and someone's making a positive difference in the world, that's hot.
You know, I would say a great mind and imagination, a sense of imagination, is, you know, along with passion.
Yes, because it's all.
Yes,
here.
Technically the largest sexual organ is your skin, but the second would be your brain.
Thank you both for coming on the show, and bon voyage. It's been wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mwah.
This was Private Matters, and I'm Max van Praag. Thriving in intimacy.
Si vos escrevem, não está a escrever. Se vos esquecer, não está a esquecer. Até o dia que vou voltar. Se vos escrever, não está a escrever. Se vos esquecer, não está a esquecer. Até o dia que vou voltar.